I'm going to marry that man someday. Oh, yeah. I smile proudly with my dentures. Oh, man. I'm an addict named Amber. Wow. Never in a million years did I think that I would be standing here or even to be asked to share here. I remember like literally every convention I'm like, I'm never doing that. I'm never doing that. Like, I'm never going to put my application in because, like, something about, like, standing up here, like, at a podium has always, like, freaked me out. I went to a speaker jam once in Charleston, and I was asked to read a reading, and they had, like, a podium. And I remember I could barely get through the reading because I was shaking, and my anxiety, I was just like, and I don't know why, because you guys are my family, you know? But it was just, like, for me, I rather sit in a chair in a circle. I'd rather feel like we're all on the same level. You know, even when I do H&I, like, I fucking hate the table, and I'm like, this table means nothing. Like, we're all equal here. But I almost touched your thing. I want to, like, move it because I'm anxious. Well, wow. I'm emotional. I cry a lot, and that's okay. I've learned to be able to be authentic in my own skin. You know, thank you for asking me to share. I was like, Erica, I knew Erica was at Region, and she's like, hey, how much clean time do you have? And I was like, no. No. And she's like, you caught me. And I'm like, oh, God, I can't say no to NA because NA didn't say no to me. But fuck, you know. Wow. I don't feel that bad up here. You know, my brain creates these false scenarios to paint me in this corner to make me feel like, you know, I'm going to be judged or I'm going to be, like, criticized or whatever, you know. And I'm just glad to be here. Like, this is the most... Ripley is the best thing that has happened to me. I think I've been to 14. This might be my 14th or 15th Ripley. And I never miss it. You know, I make sure I never miss it because I look forward to this shit. And I really needed it this time, you know. I was like, I've been in a dark place for a little longer than I'd like to be. And so I was like, man, I can't wait. I can't wait to come to Ripley and be with my people. I can't wait to get married next week and be with my people. And it really just... It filled me with gratitude. Right before this, I was chairing a meeting, the Our Purpose meeting, and like it was just made me like think about my purpose here. And like when I get here, I come here for me because I need help, you know, and I stay here for you, and I stay here because of you. And like that's what I just kind of like had to ball up my purpose here. And so I'm from Tennessee originally. That's where I was born. You know, growing up, you know, for a while, my family was like mediocre for a while. Like I grew up and we did things together and we went, you know, I felt loved and I felt like my parents cared about me and I felt like they were there and we did things and I just felt, you know, like I do here, a part of. And then like, I always mess up my dates, but it really doesn't matter. But, you know, probably around like 8 or 9, you know, my parents start to like drift away from my life. I watched them spend most of their times in their room. And I didn't know as a kid, you know, I'm 9 or 10 years old and I didn't know really what they were doing. I just knew that like I went from having a family that was always in my life and we always did things to where they secluded themselves in their room and I felt like I had nobody. My brother was like 9 years older than me and he moved out probably when I was like 15, so it was just me. I felt like I was the only child, really. And so at that young age, not knowing how to communicate my feelings, not knowing how to like talk about what's going on, like I acted out, you know. I always share this because, you know, I used to think that drugs was the problem. And way before the drugs is when, whoops, am I doing funny stuff? This is weird. way before I started using, I was a physical abuser. I always share that, I was a physical abuser, and I caused a lot of harm to people. And I realized that I got a lot of attention by doing that at a young age, and because I wasn't getting that attention at home. And so I started to lash out. I realized, I got my first fight at school, and I liked the way it made me feel, and then I realized that people started to be my friend, and they started to like me. Or my thing was, I wanted people to fear me or like me, or both. And that's just really what happened, because I did not know how that. I was crying out for help. And that's just how I cried out for help. My parents like to geographically move. I can't diagnose them with the disease, but they like to move around and start over, only to, be back where they were, back to square one. My aunt, I watched my aunt overdose and die when I was younger, and I've walked in on my dad using, and I've watched my parents get arrested. I found out when I was 12 that my mom that had been raising me was not my biological mom. And I remember sitting in the basement, and I was going through my baby book, and her name wasn't on my birth certificate. And I thought to myself that it made sense. And for the longest time I was here, I didn't think that I had trauma. I always put trauma in a box, and I thought it looked like this, and I thought that I didn't experience that. But my mom that raised me, and she's my stepmom, but I've always called her mom because I didn't know anything else. I think she married my dad when I was 2.5. She treated me different. She talked to me, like I was less than, and she made me feel belittled, and she made me feel like something was wrong with me all the time, and I never knew why. And then when I found my birth certificate and I seen her name wasn't on there, it made sense. And so that's just where that resentment started. I felt and then I created the resentment towards my birth mom. She didn't love me. She left me. How could someone do that? So, a lot of people I know have lost their children, and they don't know if they will ever have or be able to see their children again. And, I am that child. I'm that child, and I have met my birth mother since being clean. And it's been a crazy journey, and it's been something that I've really had to work on because when I met her, I was still in active addiction. And, I found her, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is money. I thought, oh, she's going to want to pay for everything. I'm going to milk her dry because she wasn't in my life. And so let's take advantage of her, and that's what I did. And then because I didn't have the relationship I thought I should have with my mom, because I never felt like she loved me, and I never felt like I was good enough. She had a son, and my dad had me, and they fought a lot over us. And so when I met my birth mom, I started to call her mom. I was wanting that mother-daughter bond, whatever it looked like. I was feeding for some kind of attention because I felt broken inside, and that caused a lot of harm that I had to work through when I got here. Because when I got clean, my mom and I's relationship got really close, my stepmom, and we were able to work through a lot of things. Like John was sharing, I was able to build a relationship with her. And so then I had to tell my birth mom I have a mom already, so I caused a lot of harm in that situation. But thank God for Narcotics Anonymous and the steps, because we've been able to work through shit, and she's still in my life. My birth mom's still in my life. She's just in my life as a relationship that I want to have, and that she's got to respect my boundaries. She used to get mad and be like, well, you can have two moms, and I get pissed. And that's just something, that's trauma. I realized, I was that's a lot of trauma that I haven't worked on. So, my parents moved around. My aunt passed away. And everywhere we went, there were my parents, just like us. Everywhere we go, there we are. And I started using, I don't know, I don't know really what age, but I used to say, I was in school when I started hanging out with the bad crowd. And really, I don't like to call them the bad crowd, because what if those were traumatized kids that don't know how to handle their emotions? They're not bad. They just decided that that's what was working for them. I used to label them. I hung out with the bad crowd. They were just fucked up just like me, And so I don't like to label good or bad anymore. So I started using, and, again, we moved around. I moved from Tennessee, I moved to North Carolina, and then I moved to Maryland. My dad was from D.C., and my grandmother lived there. And, again, I don't know who I am. I don't know, I was always suspended at school for fighting, and that's all I did. I barely graduated. When we moved to Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, I don't remember what grade I was in, but that's where things got really tough for me. And it was a huge culture shock. I moved from Maryland to West Virginia. It was a huge culture shock. I was just like, what the fuck, these hillbillies? For real, I really was like, wow, what, in the school I went to, there was not culture there. And I was like, this place is not for me. It's not for me. And then, sorry, I got sidetracked. I met my partner when I was 17, and, if anybody knows anything about relationships and using, you know what they look like. And she had already been, yes, I was with a woman for 8 years. She was already in her relationship with using for a while, so she had already been introduced to substances, and she was doing maintenance, and so I met her, and I met this substance, and I fell in love, I fell in love with two things, and I was young, and I barely graduated school, and I started stealing from my grandma, all the things. Started stealing from my grandmother, from my dad. I started harming people. I really didn't give a fuck, and when I turned 18, I got arrested for domestic violence. Go figure. Because you don't really get arrested. Well, I didn't get arrested when I was, underage. But anyways, I got arrested for domestic violence. And then I was arrested for a few times after that. And then I got arrested for some really serious charges. And I was indicted on 8 felonies in West Virginia and 8 in Maryland. And I was in this point in my life where I lived in a pop-up camper in the dead of winter up north in Berkeley fucking Springs. And I was at the point of desperation. I literally wanted to die. I had tried to do that at one point, and, it didn't work. But I'm living in this pop-up camper, shitting and pissing in a bucket and not bathing for months. And I was just so desperate. And I was about to go to court, and I didn't even want to leave the camper because I just fucking didn't know who I was. I was really broken. I had all these hopes and dreams, and I remember driving around in this town, because it's a small ass town, and there's really not much to offer there. And I just remember driving around and thinking, I'm gonna die in this fucking town. I'm gonna die here. And I had all these goals, and I had all these dreams in my head. And I just thought, well, I'm going to die here because I don't know how to quit using. I didn't know how to quit using. And I wanted to. And I wanted to stop harming my grandmother and my dad and lying and manipulating. I wanted to keep a job. I wanted to do all these things. And I just didn't know how because nobody taught me how. And I walked into the courtroom. I was getting sentenced, and, I just knew. I was like, well, they're going to put me on probation or whatever it's going to be. I'm not going to quit using. I can't stop now. What makes you think that the fucking state of West Virginia is going to make me stop, And I walked in, and I told my family, I was like, listen, I think I'm just going to send myself to jail. I think I'm just going to do that because I don't know how else to stop. And, they were just like, okay. And I walked into the courtroom, and I looked at my probation officer and the prosecuting attorney, and I was like, just send me to jail. Just send me to jail because I can't stop doing this shit. And they looked at me like, the fuck? Who sends themselves to jail? Who does that? But I did. I literally was like, please just send me to jail. I want to quit using. I'm so fucking miserable. I don't know what else to do. And so they sentenced me to jail. You know, I regretted it the next day, and I couldn't get bonded out. You know, I was like, it was like a sanction. They put me there. I was in there for like 90 days. I was withdrawing for 60 of those days, and that was fucking miserable. And I knew, and I was in there, and I'm like starting to get that clarity in there, and the fog on the glasses are starting to, you know, fade away. And I was like, I have all these ambitions, and I want to do all these things, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to hang out with those people, because like they say, change people, places, and things. What I learned that new people, places, and things can be old people, places, and things. It's about the behavior. You know, it could be new faces, but we're still manipulating and lying and cheating and stealing. And so when I got out of jail, well, let me rewind a little bit. So I was over here in the Our Purpose workshop, and I was reading just a little portion of literature that it had me read, and I was thinking about the first time the message was carried to me, and it was way before I made it here. And I didn't really realize that until I got here. But when I was in jail, there was this girl, and she had this blue book, and was like, "Hey, everybody want to come in the cell?" And I'm like, "Sure, you know, what else do I have to do, you know?" And and so I remember going in the cell, and they prayed, and they read out of this book, and they were like chatting back and forth. And I didn't know. I was like, okay, whatever, I'm just here. But, you know, later on, I get here to Narcotics Anonymous, and I start working steps, and I get a blue book. And I was like, dude, we were having a fucking meeting. We were having a meeting. I didn't even know, you know? And it's just cool, because that girl that planted that seed for me, I was able to help plant the seed again for her. You know, she went off to prison for a very long time, and I sponsored her, and we shared fucking steps through mail. And that fucking shit is my purpose, you know? That's my purpose. So that was just cool. You know, again, it didn't click. It was this subconscious thing. And so when I get out of jail, I changed the people, places, and things, but I didn't change anything else. You know, of course, I thought, like, liquid substance. I don't have a problem with this. I don't have a problem with that. And, you know, because I didn't think that I was the problem. I didn't know yet. I wasn't introduced to that yet. I just thought that drugs were my problem, and that's what made everything the way it did, because I didn't know that I had childhood trauma, and I didn't know that I had abandonment issues and codependency issues. That's the fucking root of my problem. That's the exact nature of my wrongs. And so I get out of jail, and I change people, places, and things, but here I am, you know, checking off that yet list. I never done that yet. And I started checking off that list, and I remember just literally it happened so fast. When you're talking about, you know, people that, you know, get clean and go back out, it just happened so fast. I was like, wow, how did I get here? It felt like 10 years on top of the 8 years that I was using, so fast. And I was miserable, and I had called my probation officer, and I had asked her, I said, I need your help. I need your help. I'm using. I can't stop again. I need your help. And she had called me a little bit later, and she said, pack your shit. You're going to Huntington. And I was like, what the fuck? I'm Googling. I'm like, where is this? You know, it's 5 hours away. And so I'm scared shitless, going 5 hours away out of what's familiar. Even though it's painful as fuck, it's familiar, and that's why we fucking hang out there. That's why we hang out there. And so I was scared. I didn't know what recovery had in store for me. I didn't know what it looked like. I was going far away by myself, and I didn't know what it was going to look like. And I get into a treatment facility, and, you know, they tell me when I get there, you know, I remember being in like this group room, and they would like have the paper around to write your clean date, and mine was like 0. And they end up putting me in detox. They're like, they told me you were supposed to show up clean. I was like, well, nobody told me that. And so they put me in detox, and I was mad. But I remember, you know, even after 5 days of detox, I was still detoxing, and they had put me in this like residential facility. And I walk in, and they put me in the handicap room. That was all they had. It was for women and children, and I don't have children yet. And I walk into the room and I walk into the bathroom, and on the mirror, I remember walking in and I looked, there was a sticker on the mirror and it said, "You're looking at the problem." I was pissed. I said, "I need a new room." I did. I was really mad. I was like, "I need a new room. This is not my room." I was still, when you're withdrawn, I was mad. I was angry. I was just like furious. I'm like, I'm not the fucking problem. But I'm the problem. So I get there and they take me to meetings. I did H&I was another place. They did H&I. H&I brought in a meeting to this facility, and I met people there. And then I went to outside meetings. And, I wouldn't say that I came brimming with willingness. I just didn't want to hurt anymore. And I thought, again, that drugs were my only problem. And I thought that I knew what was best. When they tell me to get a sponsor, I'm like, okay, I'll get one of those, And then the sponsor says, well, I need you to read this book, and I need you to answer these questions out of this book. And I'm like, no. I already went to school. I barely graduated. I'm not doing that. I just wasn't, I wanted to not hurt, but I wasn't willing that second. I just wasn't willing. I was like, no, that's not good. I'll pick and choose what I'm going to do. Coming to meetings at first, I sat in the back row, and, my motives weren't always pure going to the meetings. It was hard to get out of the facility I was in, But subconsciously, I was listening, the first person, I remember moving from the back row to the front row because someone was sharing it was Delma C. And something I don't know, I was just like, man, this guy's really got his shit together. And of course, when I get here, I'm a woman, and I used to be like, oh, those women over there are intimidating. And they weren't. I was just intimidated because they had their shit together and I did not. But you guys said stick with the winners, and I used to think, well, am I a fucking loser? What does that mean? I didn't know what that meant. And I get to choose who's the winners and who, I get to choose that. You get to choose your winners. I get to pick my winners. So I hopped in those women's pockets. They might not have wanted me there right away. But I'm staying. That's literally, I'm like, I'm not going nowhere, I wouldn't get invited right away to go to places, and because people come and go, and that's hard. When we have abandonment issues and attachment issues, we have a hard time connecting right away, especially to newcomers, It's hard because we're afraid you're going to fucking leave us because we need you here. But, I wouldn't get invited, but I'd invite myself. I'm going, I remember telling Robin that. I'm like, don't wait for the invite. Just show the fuck up. And that's what I did. And I probably annoyed some people, but I'm still here because of it. Wow. That's funny. Anyway, so I get in these pockets, and, I ended up getting kicked out of that treatment facility for fighting. Because I didn't want to take a look at the problem. I just thought I was going to pick and choose what I was going to do. I was very angry. And I projected that anger on a lot of people because I was never taught how to communicate those feelings, how to work through them, how to, I've been fighting my whole life because I'm trying to feel that feeling. And so I ended up getting kicked out, and I had to go report back to my probation officer. And she just was like, give me one good reason why I shouldn't send you to prison. And I was like, I don't know, but I just need to go back to Huntington. I literally begged her. I was like, there's something in Huntington. I don't know what it is yet, but I can feel it. I just know, just please. And she was like, well, you find the place to go, and I'll send you. And so I found a place to go, and that's just that day, my dad and my sister-in-law dropped me off at this place, and I haven't looked back since, I got a sponsor, and I actually read the book and answered the questions. Even though I kicked the whole way, I've learned that my red flags are resistance and refusal. I do it anyways, though. Even when I'm resisting, even when I'm refusing, I fucking do it. Even when I want to kick and even when I want to scream. Because I've gained a lot from doing so, and I've worked a lot on my internal self. When I got here, my first sponsor coming back had said, I need you, I'm pretty sure it was Erica, she said, I need you to get a home group and I need you to make a commitment for 30 days. And so I got a home group and I made a commitment for 30 days. And I've had a few sponsors here, and that's okay because I've learned something from all of them, and they're still all in my life, or they're still all in my life. And then my next sponsor was like, okay, well, let's start working steps. And I couldn't tell you at the time what I got from like steps 1, 2, and 3, maybe even 4 and 5. Like I don't know. I just know I was writing, and I just know that things were changing in my life, and that I wanted to continue to do that even when I got stuck in self. I was on my first step, and the grandma that I harmed, the grandma that I would rob blind and watch her be dope sick from her prescription drugs while I'm high, got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And, I've worked a lot through that grief and stuff because, like, I can vividly just still remember me standing in front of her like, oh, I don't know, and she's hurting. She's fucking hurting because she's, she was sick. She had cancer. And I was writing on a first step, and I remember writing in the reservations that, that's one thing I didn't think that I could get through clean. I thought I would have to use. If my grandma dies, I'm going to have to use. And, like, that's fucking selfish of me. Like, I have to use because someone dies. And that's just where I was at the time. But thinking back, it's like, it was really selfish. But the change that happened in that first step and to my second step, the we of the program showed up. Like, you guys showed up. You told me you had family members that passed away and you stayed clean through it. We circle the wagons. We take turns saving each other here. And that's what happened. You guys circle the wagons. When my grandma got really sick and we would drive. I'd drive to Berkeley Springs so often, and I was able to be of service to her. I remember I didn't know what was going on. I remember sharing with Nick C., and he was like, man, you're just being of service to your grandma. And I was like, oh, like, it's profound, and so simple. Like, I didn't realize that you're just being of service, Service is in here, out of here, and I was being of service to her. I was showing up for her, and, and she ended up passing away, and I didn't have to use. And it was painful, and there was days where I was just like, what the fuck is going on, How did I get here? How am I staying here? Because I like to question everything. And so, I went on and I stayed clean, and, I was able to, like, be of service to my dad through that process. I was her only grandbaby, and so I was spoiled, and she, like, had a mural of me. And so she was like, it was hard to lose her, because she's always been in my corner. Her and my dad loved me a lot, but they loved me so much that it could have killed me. They were enablers. And I used to get so mad at my mom for being so hateful. She would just, like, she told me the last time I had seen her before I went to treatment, she was like, pack your shit and never come back. And I was mad for a long time, but then I became very grateful because if it wasn't for her, my grandma and my dad probably would have loved me to death, because I'm a great manipulator, and they would just continue to, like, forgive me and forgive me and forgive me. And so, I had to, like, turn that hate into some gratitude because I wouldn't be here also without that. So I'm just going to, like, fast forward some because sometimes, I don't know, like, I'm thinking about my dad, and if anybody knows me, knows how important my dad is to me, was to me. 2 years ago, I got a call. Well, 2 years ago, I was asked to speak in Parkersburg, and they wanted me to speak at a podium too. I was like, pulled up a chair and sat next to it. I was like, this is weird. But so I went and spoke, and it was a Wednesday. I think it was like September 11th, and I went and spoke in Parkersburg. And, like, this is just where my higher power shows up. This is where the we shows up. This is where I know, like, when I get that moment of, like, this is right, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Even when it's fucking ugly and even when it's painful, this is exactly like those aha moments. And I was in Parkersburg, and I was speaking, and I ended up staying the night with a friend. And the next morning, I remember getting a call from our neighbor, my dad's neighbor, and she told me my dad was in the hospital, and, they were thinking that it was cancer, and And, I just was like, of course, I started crying. I was like, oh, my God, I just think, like, I don't want to lose my dad, And we went out to eat, and I got another call. I was there, and, like, I was told that it was progressing and that it was, it just didn't look good. And they were there. Like, those two people were there, and I was just like, man, this is right where I'm supposed to be. She took me to this, like, cathedral that had this beautiful, like, all this beautiful shit going on. We went and bought sage at this fucking place, and we're sitting in the parking lot at this place burning sage, and just like that shit is like, that's the circle of the wagons, I didn't know that was going to happen, and she just happened to be there. And I think about that all the time, like, what would have happened if I was somewhere else? Like, I was with her for a reason, and that holds an important place in my heart. I end up leaving. So on September 11th, we found out that my dad had stage 4 lung cancer, adrenal cancer, colon cancer, and a 12/9 mass wrapped around his stomach. And it was like, I had a loss for words, I was, what the fuck? And so I went back home. I drove back home. I called my boss, and I was off work for almost 30 days. I went back home, and I drove every day to the hospital. And there was a point where, the doctors would come in, and they're like, well, we need to do a biopsy, and we need to figure out, like, what stage, or how long he's going to have. And it went from, like, about a year, and I'm like, okay, like, I know that's not a lot of time, but I felt okay with that. And then the next thing you know, they come in, and it's 6 months. And then they did another biopsy. And I just remember sitting there, and they were like, it's only going to be a couple months. And I hadn't been to a meeting. I was in Winchester, Virginia, driving to the hospital every day to be with my dad. And it was like, I never had one moment of selfishness. It was the most selfless time of my life. Like, it really was. And it's not like I was, like, actively practicing selflessness, but I didn't get that, because I can be self-centered and be like, oh, things are getting in the way of what's going on in my life. And never did I feel that. Never did that happen. And John had came up. He had been, he'd been working, and John came up to the hospital, and they had came in, and when they had said that he only had a couple months, I just, like, I bawled. I was bawling. I was like, wow, like, it went from a year, and it went from 6 months, and it went to a couple months, and I just was like, what am I going to do without my dad, And John was like, I think we need to get to a meeting. I hadn't been to a meeting in almost a month. And so I got on my phone, and this is fucking God. This is higher power, whatever you want to call it. I'm in the care of shit. He told me to Google. He told me to Google a meeting. I got my phone out, and I Googled a meeting, and there was a meeting in that hospital that night. A Narcotics Anonymous meeting in that hospital that night. And I was just like, what the fuck? That shit is so profound. Like, that, it made me feel a little lighter, And I went to the meeting, and I shared. And I felt like I didn't know any of those people, but they were my family, I felt at home, and I was like, they just knew what I was feeling, and they were there. Another moment I'd like to share about my dad. I ended up moving him to the hospice house of Huntington. I had to make decisions. My dad left me with all these decisions that I did not want to make. I was like, what in the fuck? Like, I don't want to be making these decisions, and I don't want to be. My parents were got a divorce like 3 weeks before this, and it was a very ugly divorce. And I was at a point in my life where I thought I was the only responsible one, and it was very uncomfortable because I had never been put in that kind of like position to like make financial decisions or. And my dad was like, he didn't want to go through any kind of chemo. He was like, no, man, I just want to die. He's like, I don't want to feel shit. Get me high as hell, And so I was like, okay. I moved him to the hospice house in Huntington. And he got there on a Friday. And, I had to go back. So I got him there on a Friday. Me and my nephew were there, and he was coherent. We were talking, and if you know what a hospice house is, the coherent doesn't last very long. And so we dropped him off. He had to do his thing. The next morning, me and my nephew came back to, say goodbye. We were going to go back to his house. So, like, John was there. We were going to clean out his fridge and stuff, his food and stuff like that. And the next day, he wasn't coherent. So like Friday was the last time I ever talked to him, and had like a conversation. He was mad at me for some reason. He was cranky. Went back home and stayed at my dad's. And that Sunday morning, I was like, I'm going to call the hospice house to check on my dad. And I called, and the nurse was like, he's declining, and she was explaining the symptoms that he was going through. And I was just like, what do I do? What the fuck do I do? Do I go? Do I not go? I don't want to like panic. I don't want to like make the wrong decision. Like, what do I do? And I've had some people say, when you don't know what to do nothing at all. And like, this is another, oh my God, I'm in the care of shit. And John was in my dad's shed and came out with this book. It was a blue book, and it had like a sailboat on it. I don't remember the name of it. But it was like, I started reading it, and it talks about the stages of death in it, like a month before, a week before, And so I read through this whole book. It was just a tiny pamphlet, and I got to the end, and the last chapter, or the last page, was just talking all the symptoms that this nurse had said, what my dad was going through. And so that was like my sign. I was like, I got in the car and I left. I was like, oh my God. So I got there, and I don't remember what time it was. Probably like 7 p.m. And I was like, they told me I could come stay in his room with him, and I got situated, and my brother called, and I had my brother on the phone on speaker talking to my dad, like telling him he loved him, and thank you for being there and taking care of me, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna get off the phone, and I walked over and I like gave my dad a hug, and he went, and he didn't take his other his last breath, and I was just like, wow, like, to me, he waited for me, and that's just like, shit like that is just why, like, that was a profound time, and I hold on to that, like, a lot, because that right there, when I fucking want to get stuck in self, and when I want to fucking play in pity, and when I want to, like, create all these false scenarios in my head that are fucking not true, and I create them, and then I attach these emotions to them, and they didn't even happen yet, I have to think about that. Those moments when, there was a meeting in the hospital the day I found out my dad was only going to live for a couple weeks. Or the fact that I needed a sign, and God gave me one with that fucking book. And the fact that that was my sign, and then I show up and my dad took his last breath, and I was able to be there with him, Narcotics Anonymous has given me that, and given me the opportunity and the ability to walk through life like that and stay clean. Wow. So after that, I told you my mom and dad got a divorce. And so I had built this relationship with my mom, the one that I wanted that attachment and wanted that feeling, and I wanted to like feel whole with her. And we had like this relationship I thought was very well, and it ended up turning really ugly. And my mom hasn't been in my life for months now. After my dad passed away, she just turned into a person I didn't recognize. I don't know if she's using, I'm not sure. I just know that she didn't respect me, and she didn't respect my boundaries, and I've learned here that I don't have to accept unacceptable behavior even if you're my family, even though it fucking hurts, because I worked really hard to build a relationship with someone, and because I learned that I have codependency issues. And so now she's gone, and I'm like, I'm working through that shit. I'm working through not feeling like everybody's going to leave me all the time. Because that's how I feel a lot. Like, people are going to leave me, Working through that shit and trauma and is very hard. That's why I've been in a dark place, because, like, I see a therapist, outside issue, I know. But I remember this, like, simple fucking question she asked me. And it just, like, blew my mind. She said, why do you want to have a relationship with her? And I couldn't answer it. I don't want to say because she's my mom, why do you want to have a relationship with her? And I just had to think, like, if she wasn't my mom, just like other people in my life that do those things, I would not allow them to be close to me. So I have to, like, detach from this idea and, like, create my own memories and create my own traditions. My nephew His dad is in prison, my brother. His pop-pop's gone, and his nana's left his life too. And so I moved him up here near me, and like, we have Christmas together, you know? And I hide the pickle now, if you know what that is. My dad always hid the pickle, and now I hide the pickle. And like, I'm creating these things that sometimes are very difficult to like create, because I still have this idea that I should be at my dad's house on Christmas, and we should be hiding the pickle, and we should be finding the pickle, and shit like that. And so, man, that shit's fucking difficult. It really is difficult. Relationships has been very hard. I shared a 4th and 5th step last week, and that's like, when I said earlier that I didn't really know what I got from my first round of steps with the 1st through 5, I was just like, okay, I learned about some resentments, you know. I also learned that I'm more fucked up now, because I can't blame it on drugs now. And I was like, okay, I'm going to work through all these resentments, and a lot of those resentments were tied into my using, and so this time they were all tied in to like what my life looks like now. And working a 5th step, I never knew what the exact nature of my wrong was. I always blamed it on drugs or this issue or that issue, or they did this or they did that, and you know, I've learned that the exact nature is like the trauma that I have not healed yet, and all those abandonment and codependency and all those things that I didn't know that I put in a box, and I didn't think you know, like I used to think codependency, oh, I only need you, you need me, and it goes deeper than that. Just like everything here goes deeper. My relationships go deeper. My relationship with my higher power has deepened so much, you know. The second round of steps, on a 2nd step, you know, I had someone really close to me go back out, and that's where I started to feel the red car, you know. You got the red car, the trigger, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, oh my God, everybody's going to leave me. And I sat with myself, you know, because I look for things, whether it be a reaction, a response, a like, a heart, all that fucking shit. I look for it. And what I need to do is I need to look for it in myself. And so I was working a 2nd step at that time, and I realized that I was like attaching to something, and I needed to like attach with sitting by myself with my higher power and like allowing myself to go through this pain. And that doesn't mean that I didn't utilize my friends, because they were there, but I knew at the time I needed to be alone, because I was looking for a reaction and a response out of them. And sometimes I need to be that person for me. And that was like another like aha moment. It was like, wow, like what the fuck? Like, I am, and when I shared my step this past weekend, I was writing on a resentment, and my sponsor said, I need you to take that name out, and I need you to put your name. And so I'm rereading this resentment, but I'm applying my name instead of the thing or the person. And I was like, holy shit. And so I had this, I wrote about a resentment on God. And I really couldn't tell you why I had the resentment on God. I think I just needed to blame something. And so I took, you know, my resentment to God, and I put my name, and it just like gave me this like click of like, okay, my idea here is I want to be more connected with my higher power, and I've created these characteristics that I want my higher power to look like, and that's principle. Like, it's so fucking simple, and I didn't realize that. You know, I have self-will, and I have I have self-will, which is defect, and then I have my higher power, which is principle. You know, that's God. You know, that's the connection. That's the we. And I like to complicate shit. And so that really, really, really helped me, because I've been in a dark place for a while, and I was just like, holy shit. So I'm learning to be kind to myself. I read something out of a book that said, would you talk to a child the way that you talk to yourself? And my answer is yes. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Oh, God. Sometimes, no. My answer is no. I wouldn't talk to a scared child, the way I talk to myself. And that's how I need to talk to my inner child, my inner broken child. Because I'm not doing any good beating myself up, and that's what I've been doing for a little bit, you know. But I'm super grateful for Narcotics Anonymous. I'm super grateful for all of you guys. And, you know, I heard something this past spring at a workshop. It was in a 12-step workshop, and it said, the password here is help. The password here is help. And I just thought that was so simple. Like, ask for help, give help. yeah, I'm going to keep it simple. Thanks for letting me share.